Test for reasonableness, second criteria, element B. The means, even if rationally connected to the objective in the first sense, should impair as little as possible the right or freedom in question. Mr. Pierre de Savoy, MP.
Why does this law make criminals out of addicted people who need to be medically treated rather than jailed?
Why it fails. Questions why the bill impairs rights and freedoms more than an alternative approach. Mr. Pierre de Savoy, MP.
If we put a drug addict in jail, not only will we have a miserable, sick prisoner, but it will cost us an added $70,000 per year for most of his life. A withdrawal treatment and a rehabilitation program would only cost a few thousands of dollars and would return to society an individual capable of greatly contributing to his or her community.
Why it fails. Rehabilitation programs would impair rights and freedoms less. Mr. Pierre de Savoy, MP.
Instead of treating those who suffer from a dependency, the law makes criminals of them. Thus, Bill C-7 is a tool to control and suppress crime rather than to promote health.
Why it fails. Treatment would impair our rights and freedoms less than making criminals out of drug use. Mr. Pierre de Savoy, MP.
Indeed, we consider that Bill C-7 has several significant flaws and not only ignores the parameters to be defined in effective drug control strategy but also opens the door to some major adverse effects.
Why it fails. A drug control strategy does not require a criminalized approach. Regulation similar to nicotine and alcohol would impair rights and freedoms less. Mr. Myron Thompson, MP.
Sharing cannabis with a friend can equal 14 years in prison, according to this bill.
Why it fails. Expresses concern regarding the limits to our rights and freedoms the bill allows for. Mr. Pierre de Savoy, MP.
The May 27, 1993 issue of the Globe and Mail contained an article by Professors Uesprich and Solomon about the bill now before this House. The article states the following: the new legislation fails to address the vast majority of the problems that stem from the existing legislation and raises many new concerns. The proposed legislation is more complex and impenetrable than previous laws. The bill maintains the punitive nature of the law, which is based on preconceptions which the findings of the Ledane Commission should have done away with once and for all, 20 years ago. In its present form, the bill makes drug addiction a crime.
Why it fails. The Ledane Commission was a government-funded study from 1972 recommending further research into possible alternative approaches to better achieve the objective and impairing our rights and freedoms less. Mr. Myron Thompson, MP.
One more thing before I conclude. I want to mention two well-known psychotropic substances which have been left out of this bill. They are, predictably, nicotine and alcohol. Even though Canada and Quebec have always been relatively tolerant about the use of such substances, the population is very aware of the fact that nicotine is harmful, causes serious health problems and reduces the quality of life and life expectancy of people. As for alcohol, driving a vehicle with 0.08% or more of that substance in your blood is already a criminal offense. I wonder then if this would not be the right time to recognize the true nature of these substances and include them in Bill C-7 with observations that would reflect our modern tolerance and awareness.
Why it fails. Alternative approach that would impair our rights and freedoms less. Mr. Myron Thompson, MP.
This bill confuses regulations with criminal law. It presents far too wide powers for inspectors enforcing regulations.
Why it fails. Far too wide powers. Powers, as in the power to take actions that impair our rights and freedoms. Mr. Myron Thompson, MP.
This bill also shows this government does not understand the concept of justice. The punishment should meet the crime.
Why it fails. If the punishment does not fit the crime, then clearly laws impair our rights and freedoms more than necessary. Mr. Pierre de Savoy, MP.
Therefore, this legislation must be redrafted so as to allow what is useful and necessary, while prohibiting what is not, and what constitutes undue and unacceptable intrusion into the private lives of honest citizens.
Why it fails. Undue and unacceptable intrusion. Measures do not impair our rights and freedoms as little as possible.